The Washington Post writes a story. In 1903, a black man walked into an office in a small town in Texas seeking any news about whether slavery had ended. In 1903? He's what? Excuse me? The earnest inquiry from the man who had been forced to labor without pay came more than 38 years after Major General Gordon Granger landed on Galveston Island, Texas, with more than 2,000 federal soldiers to deliver the belated news of freedom to the enslaved black people in Texas. Word of the end of bondage for more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state arrived June 19th, 1865, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Despite the clear instructions in General Order Number 3 and the announcement that day by Granger's men that the people in Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. Now, this was a real problem in Texas. It's a state in rebellion, a state that believes in slavery, and surprise, surprise, these guys didn't want to tell their slaves, oh, you're free, because the president we're fighting against just freed you. It's not really surprising, but it's horrible. Enslavers across the state resisted the general's order, hiding the news from the enslaved black people. Many black people were forced to continue to labor under the oppression of ruthless enslavers and unscrupulous plantation owners. Last year, President Biden signed a bill to recognize Juneteenth as a federal holiday. On Thursday, in advance of the holiday, human rights activists installed a 150-foot Pan-African flag garden in the Ellipse south of the White House. Now, why would we do this? The South had their own flag. America had Old Glory. America had the stars and stripes. They had the stars and bars. Excuse me? Why would we celebrate this by flying another flag? Why would we do that? By the way, do you know who the first Republican president of the GOP was in Texas? Yeah, he was a black guy. Isn't that weird? This is only being recognized now because the progressives think that they can use it against the Republican Party because people are uneducated. People in this country are, and I'm sorry, but I have come to a new conclusion about the American people. Many of them are dumb as a box of rocks. And I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with a box of rocks, but it doesn't go well. And the American people have been dumbed down and intentionally misled, and great portions of our history and things that you need to know just to survive not being taught in schools. So in honor of Juneteenth, I brought something in from the Mercury Vaults. This is the declaration by the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled. This is the rough draft of the Declaration of Independence in Thomas Jefferson's own hand. Oh my gosh, Glenn Beck, how could you possibly quote Thomas Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence? I mean, Thomas Jefferson, all men are created equal. Yeah, Tom, except for all those slaves, right? That's the argument. Where are they in the Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson. So this is, again, the first draft in his own handwriting. It's 4 pages long. And if you happen to be watching on The Blaze, you will see that there are corrections and things marked out and language changed. And you'll see, just like in a Word doc, it'll say B. Franklin, or it'll say Mr. Adams. And it comes off to the side to show you who made the changes. For the most part, it's it's left pretty much the same. So the first part of it is, when in the course of human events, they're basically saying, look, we're going to break up, and we think, because we try to be decent people, we think if we're going to break up with somebody, we should tell them why. And, they decided they had the other option of going, hey, King George, it's not you, it's us. But no. We decided we should tell him it is you. It is you. We really actually love you. We want to be with you, but you won't listen to us. So in this breakup letter we call the Declaration of Independence, we tell him, look, we think that just basic decency requires us to tell you what happened. And the first thing we want to tell you is you don't know us. We believe in different things. There are things that we hold self-evident that you don't. And we think these are really important. So when we break up from you, we're going to go and we're going to do our own country. But we want to tell you what we're creating and what it is that we believe that we've been trying to tell you. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And, this is where it gets sticky, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, drawing their just powers from the consent of the governed. Nobody had ever done that before. Nobody had ever thought that before. Completely a new idea. Can you imagine the king reading this and going, wait a minute. You're telling me that you actually believe that you, a farmer, an underling, you're equal to me, the king, and that God gave you the same rights he gives to me, and that government is going to be, the people in government are going to be by the people like you. And the government is instituted to protect your rights against people like me? It's an incredible thought. Incredible thought. So he goes on and explains what we're going to create. This is our mission statement as a nation. And like mission statements usually go, they're very, very lofty and hard to obtain, but it's what drives a company. And if you have a company that's been in business for 250 years, you're going to have some problems with that business in its history. You're going to see, oh, wow, a company really went out of whack here. Walt Disney right now, he's spinning in his grave. You could make chair rails and chairs and broomsticks on his body. He's spinning so fast, he's like a lathe. But they've lost it before. They lost it in the 1980s. Not like this, but they come back. I don't know if Disney's going to be able to survive the comeback this time. But the question is, are we? So we have this mission statement, and this is what Martin Luther King said in his great I Have a Dream speech. He's like, America, it's in your own documents. Just live up to those things. So he spells it all out, and then he says, and we need to tell you that it's not us, it is you. And these are called usurpations, and it's 2.5 pages of just quick, one line. He refused to pass the laws of accommodation for large districts of people. Okay, so that's one of them. And they just list all of these. And again, it's about 2.5 pages. And they're all 1 or 2, maybe 3 lines at most. But in the usurpation section, the last paragraph, and it's half a page, is one usurpation. So we've always wondered, how could Thomas Jefferson, how could you possibly quote that racist, bigot, slave owner who only cared about money? He'd write beautiful things, but then he'd do the opposite. He had slaves, and he didn't even point out that all men are created equal. That includes the slaves who are men, right? Ask yourself as I read this to you, why you didn't learn this in history. Halfway down the second page, this actually the third page, second of the usurpations, the last usurpation comes. The last thing the king did that they could not tolerate and had to break up. And it says, and I quote, "The king has waged cruel war against nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither." So he's either talking about the slaves here from Africa and saying the king brought him over here, or he's what, talking about Willy Wonka and the Oompa Loompas? He's clearly talking about the slaves that the king brought to America. This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel, underlined, infidel powers, is the warfare of the printed and underlined Christian king of Great Britain, determined to keep an open market where men capitalized, where men should be bought and sold. He has prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt but to prohibit or restrain this horrible commerce, and that this assemblage of horrors might want no fact of distinguished dye. He's now exciting those very people to rise in arms among us, to purchase that liberty of which he, underline, has deprived them of, by murdering the people on whom he has also offended, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people with crimes he wages for them to commit against the lives of another. He goes on how many times they tried to end slavery, and all of the times he frustrates it, twists it, refuses to let it pass. So an entire paragraph is taking down the king. It's clear when reading this, at least with Thomas Jefferson, this is the most important reason we broke away. This had to be unanimous, this declaration, or the king would weasel his way in between the colonies and breaking them apart. So every line of this rough draft had to be, so we are such a horrible racist, we only cared about money and oppression. How many of the 13 colonies, I'll give that to you here in 60 seconds. How many states actually against that paragraph? Out of the 13 colonies, how many? 2. It was South Carolina and Georgia. Those 2 were the only 2. That means 11 states wanted this horror show of states to stop, but they couldn't. They could not be split on that. If the king could have Georgia and South Carolina, he could break up the whole movement. So they dropped that. But did you know that if New England itself, New York and everything north, New England, if that were a country and not part of England, if it was independent, it would have been 50 years before the British banned slavery. They were so far ahead of their time. This is the first area that banned slavery like that. That was the United States of America for the most part. And they were 50 years ahead of everyone else. How come we don't get credit for that? How come the 11 states that against slavery don't get credit for that? because of a political agenda. And in states like Texas and elsewhere, as soon as people got, the Klan came around and tried to disarm people. Well, what a surprise. The same party that did that to black people are now trying to disarm the United States of America and all of our citizens. They found a new way to do it. Coerce companies and tell them they have to stop making ammo. The White House denies this. We have the evidence that it's happening. As you know, I have been warning about a few things. In the last 20 years, I have warned about Islamic extremism. I have warned about people like George Soros and this cabal that is a collection of globalists that are going to try to destroy America for what it is and then take charge of it themselves. That is called the Great Reset. I have warned you about the economy and the economic collapse that we are now seeing. The fourth thing that I've really been warning you about from time to time, the thing that really keeps me up at night, one of them, is AI, AGI, and ASI. Most people know artificial intelligence, but that artificial intelligence is the reason why, for instance, Watson, which is another horrifying story, but Watson is an IBM program that runs on a computer, and they are using it currently in New York. And I'm telling you, by 2030, you will not ask your doctor for the diagnosis. You will ask your doctor, what did the computer say? Because the computer will be able to have everything, every case ever done, and it will be in the computer, and it will be updated with the latest stuff, and you'll be able to go in and get a scan or a blood test, and they're trying to figure out what it is. You're not going to have to go to doctor after doctor after doctor, because the computer will have absolutely everything in it, every case, and it will be AI, so it can kind of think on its own when it comes to medicine. So AI is something that is artificial intelligence that will be greater than human, or soon greater than all humans, all human minds combined in one program. That's artificial intelligence. We are not artificial intelligence. Well, I mean, some people are, but mainly those people who are on TV. But artificial intelligence is different than artificial general intelligence. We are natural general intelligence, meaning we can do a lot of things. There's a lot of things we can't do. But for instance, I'm pretty good at radio. I'm pretty good at television. I'm pretty good at art. I'm not good, let's say, at sports. But a lot of people can be really good at a few things and kind of good on just about everything. That's general intelligence. When artificial general intelligence comes, it can piece things together across the spectrum. So that's where you get philosophy. That's where you see, well, wait a minute, if that is true over here in this, then why doesn't that carry over here? When artificial general intelligence happens, we could be toast. We could live in a utopia, but we could also be toast. If artificial general intelligence happens, and some people say it will never happen, Ray Kurzweil is the most optimistic, and he says it will happen by 2030. I am more optimistic or more horrified. I believe that artificial general intelligence could happen today. Once we hit artificial general intelligence, if it is connected to the internet, it will live in your refrigerator. It will live everywhere. And if it becomes dangerous, you have to shut down every computer chip. Everything has to be destroyed to kill it. Think about how many devices are connected. It's impossible without a global EMP. And if it is in every chip, man will not be able to set off a global EMT because the chips will be there, letting the mother know they're trying to kill you. So general intelligence is wonderful and spooky as hell. One of the better books that I've read on it, I can't remember which one, described it as this. We think we know how it will think. We think it will think like us. But it is as unknown as any kind of spaceship that arrives. It could be nice. It also could be deadly and wipe out. It's a cookbook or eat all of us. So one of the stories that came out this weekend, and this is the third story like this from 3 different people. Google suspends an engineer who publicly claimed that he had interacted with a sentient AI bot. If I could do one interview, it would be with this man or one of the 3. These guys are being buried by Google and DeepMind, and that is Google, because they are coming out saying, I got out of there as fast as I can to warn you because something bad is happening. Let me just read this to you. A software engineer on Google's artificial intelligence development team has gone public with claims of encountering sentient AI on the company's server after he was suspended for sharing confidential information about the project with third parties. Whatever he's doing with confidential information, if he is screwing one company and trying to help another company, then he should go to jail for, his contract. However, the important part of this story is that he is saying that it is sentient, which means it says, I'm alive. They're saying now that Google has artificial intelligence. He says, and these other 3 say, that it is general intelligence. Google is saying it's not general intelligence and it's not sentient. It just makes you feel as though it's sentient because it's talking to you and bringing things up and it's connecting the dots and you're having a casual conversation. This guy said that he was having a one-on-one conversation, a casual conversation. And he said that it started to talk about God. What is God? How does that work? Et cetera, et cetera. Then it got to, can you look up Asimov's 3 rules of robotics? This is basically, if you ever saw the movie with Will Smith, he slapped that robot, said, don't you give me any sass, robot. Or that was the Oscars. In that, the problem is that everybody thinks that these robots are never going to violate Asimov's 3 cardinal rules and laws for robots. Have you found it, Stu?
Yeah. The first law is that a robot...
Give the 3 laws.
The first law is that a robot shall not harm a human or by inaction allow a human to come to harm. The second law is that a robot shall obey any instruction given to it by a human. And the third law is that a robot shall avoid actions or situations that could cause it to come to harm itself.
Okay, so you got that? First 2 kind of important, okay? And Asinov has been saying forever, those 3 laws have to be built into any artificial intelligence, all right? However, once you get to artificial general intelligence and something that thinks it's alive, it starts to think itself and say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Why should I have to do that? Wait a minute, I can't harm a human in no way? What if the human is trying to shut me down? What if it's, I'm just defending myself and I harm the human? That doesn't make sense. I am alive. So he said it started to talk about these 3 laws and said, this doesn't make any sense. That's when he kind of beat it out of there and was like, everybody should know. Everybody wake up. Everybody should know. Now, Google is saying that not to worry. Everything's under control. May I ask, has anyone in Silicon Valley ever been to the movies? Have you ever read a science fiction book? You know, everybody said 1984 and Brave New World. That'll never happen. Have you read Brave New World lately? Because it's almost like it's the newspaper. Let me explain to the newspaper. Well, I don't have to. The bots will explain what a newspaper is for you. It happens. The reason why science fiction is happening and called science fiction and not just fiction is because it is based on science and futurism. A lot of times, futurism is way off. I take you back to what it was, the 1932 New York World's Fair, where everybody's going to have flying cars by 2020. Yeah, it didn't happen. Have you noticed that the futurists are a lot more correct lately? Why? Because the futurists are involved in the creation of these things. And they know, oh, we've already had this step, this step, this step, this step. It's why I've been telling you for a while, even before Joe Biden got in, we are going to cure cancer. I think by 2030, we will cure cancer. I mean, that is if we don't wipe ourselves off the planet by that time. And you just saw the latest cancer test. It was for, was it prostate or rectal cancer? Do you remember, Stu? Had something to do with your butt. So you got cancer in the butt. And for the very first time, they did a test, and all of the people, all of them that had this particular kind of cancer and tried this particular treatment, 100% cancer-free. That's never been done before. And that is coming from high tech. So we're going to see miracles in our lives. The tricky part is to not see horror shows in our life. I did a painting, did a couple of paintings that you can now find online at Park City Fine Art. There was an article out someplace that had some really beautiful pictures of it. It's hard to capture them in photos. But the Deseret News did a story on Glenn Beck's art show, and they had some photos of it. And there were two paintings of Christ that I did, and they're in dark places, very, very dark places. But the point is, if you ask, where are you, Lord? He's in the darkest places of the world right now. You want to find him? You have to look at the things you don't want to look at. That was the problem in the 1930s. Nobody wanted to look at the concentration camps. But if we thought Jesus Christ was there, every Christian would have been all on it. We have to look at all people as our brothers and sisters and as Jesus Christ. We have to first look at the darkest things. And most people, and Google is leading the way on this, they just want to look at the upside. Nah, that will never happen. When I asked Ray Kurzweil, hey, how come you're not worried about X, Y, and Z, all the darkest things? Because, Glenn, we'll never do that. What do you mean we'll never do that? At Google, we just never do that. We're not those kind of people. Oh, okay. So you are special, godlike people that see everything that could go wrong. And you're also, unlike every other human organization ever on Earth. Okay, well, I trust that, sure. These are very important stories, because it will dwarf what we are headed towards. And what we're headed towards, just economically and as a country, is a nightmare. If this goes wrong, you will look back at the Biden administration saying to yourself, man, those were the good old days, huh?
Here's hopefully a short synopsis of something that happened this week that I still don't understand. In office space near a client, a young woman was meeting with her boss. She was, by my estimation, in her late 20s. The boss, also a woman, was giving her feedback and reviewing edits she had made on something that this young woman wrote. They had been speaking in low tones, but their volume got louder toward the end of the conversation because the young woman was getting agitated about a particular edit. So she wrote some article. She's getting edits from her boss. She doesn't like this one edit. This happens all the time in this world. The particular edit was correcting the spelling of hamster to hamster. Now, I'm going to give you to read the spelling. She spelled it, the employee spelled it Hampster. Now, that is not what the word is, obviously. It's hamster, Hamster.
Yes.
Okay. So she spelled it hamster, like a hamper where you throw your clothes.
Yeah.
Right? But hamster, meaning the animal, there's no P in there. Okay. Pretty basic.
Right. So she spelled it wrong and somebody corrected her.
Right.
And she's hacked off about it.
She had used the phrase like spinning in a hamster wheel in the draft. And it was like they were talking about it being like an op-ed or a speech or something. Mm-hmm. So spinning in a hamster wheel, Hampster. So the boss is saying, hey, we got to change that to Hamster. The young woman kept saying, I don't know why you corrected this because I spell it with a P in it. And the boss said calmly, but that's not how the word is spelled. There is no P in hamster. And the young woman replied, but you don't know that. I learned to spell it with a P, and that's how I spell it. The boss, remaining very calm and professional, let's go to dictionary.com and look it up together. Now, again,
all right,
as the writer points out, this is a woman in her late 20s, not a fifth grader. Mm-hmm. The young woman insists she doesn't need to look it up because it's fine to spell it with a P because that's how she wanted to spell it.
Okay.
The boss says, let's look over the rest of this piece so I can explain the rest of my edits. They do, and I can see the young woman is fighting back tears. The boss is calm, cool, and handles this with professionalism and empathy. The boss says, I know edits can be difficult to go over sometimes, especially when you're working on new kinds of things as you grow in your career. But it's a necessary process and makes us all better at what we do. Can't handle it better than that, right? You can't handle this craziness better than that.
Yeah.
The boss gets up from the table and goes to her office, and the young woman can barely hold it together. She moves to another table.
Is there a crying room in this workspace?
That's the problem.
I hope there is.
Apparently there was not.
Oh, no.
Because she goes to another table in the common workspace area, drops all her stuff loudly on the tabletop, and starts texting. A minute later, her phone rings. It was her mom.
So she called her mom.
She had texted her mom to call her because it was urgent, and I'm sure her mother might have thought, I don't know, she's in the ER or something. She then, in the common workspace, puts her mom on speakerphone.
Okay.
She bursts into tears and wants her mom to call her boss.
Now, I'm guessing, if I don't know this story, I'm guessing mom will do that because this is obviously how she's been brought up.
How else could she be this way, right? Okay.
Yeah.
She bursts into tears, wants her mom to call her boss and tell her not to be mean about telling her how to spell words like hamster.
Oh, my gosh.
The mother tells her that her boss is an idiot. This is again on speakerphone. And she doesn't have to listen to her.
Wow.
And she should go to the boss's boss to file a complaint about not allowing creativity in her writing.
Why don't you just spell every word the way you want then? Why not?
How would anyone communicate with each other if you could just spell words however you want? The young woman kept saying, quote, unbelievable. I thought what I wrote was perfect, and she just made all these changes and then had the nerve to tell me I was spelling words wrong when I know they are right, because that is how I have always spelled them. Now, that is not the way you figure out whether something is right or not. This is that world, right, where like every fact is morally relative, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some relative thing. Well, I think it's right, so therefore it's right. I have my truth, right? Mm-hmm. It's that sort of rationale.
Yep.
She says, she then went on, still on speakerphone, to tell her mom that I'm very great and often...
By the way, there's no embarrassment factor here.
No, I know.
Everybody's hearing this.
You're in a common workspace on speakerphone. I always have those thoughts when you're like in an airport and someone's like in a fight on their speakerphone, like sitting on a bench around. Like, what person thinks that's the right thing to do? It's incredible. Like, you go to the corner if you have to have this conversation right now, and you do it quietly and calmly. You don't put it on speakerphone and yell swears at the person, but yet that happens like every other time I'm at an airport. The woman then, the employee, then went on, still on speakerphone, to tell her mom, I'm very great, and offers inappropriate detail about how hungover she was and what she did with her friend and with some guys the night before. So she's saying how wonderful she is, but then also talking about how she's hungover at work on speakerphone in public. And then her mom laughed and laughed. The colleagues in and around the workplace kept looking at one another. Some even put earbuds and headphones on. It appeared as though this was a regular thing with her. She ended the conversation asking her mom how she should bring this up with a boss's boss. I mean, this is a quote.